So this weekend was the United States Grand Prix from Austin, Texas, and I figured I'd lend an American voice to the F1 discussion and talk about this race because it was certainly might have been the best Grand Prix of this season. It was a fantastic race with lots of twists and turns, and certainly it was the best race so far that has been held for F1 at Circuit of the Americas. Now, there were two major stories going into this weekend. The first and foremost one was Lewis Hamilton and his quest for a fifth Formula One World Championship, which he could clinch this weekend if he won the race and Sebastian Vettel finished anywhere worse than fifth. Now that would tie him with the great Juan Manuel Fangio, and we're getting to the place here with Lewis Hamilton where we're starting to, if you didn't already think he was one of the greats, certainly numbers-wise, he is moving up the table at a rapid rate. And this season has been, I would say, probably Lewis's best. He hasn't put a wheel wrong all season long. And frankly, he really hasn't had the best car. That's probably the first time we've been able to say that in the turbo hybrid era. In my opinion, at least from my observations and the observations of people who know a lot more about what they're talking about in F1, the Ferrari seems to be the better car this year. But the Mercedes team, and specifically Lewis Hamilton, has been mistake-free. They have been near perfection this season, and that's why Hamilton has this mammoth points lead going into the final few races of the season. The other talking point was the track itself, Circuit of the Americas. Now, regular viewers to my channel will know that I'm not the biggest fan of COTA. Now, that being said, I have to give credit where credit's due. I think it is probably one of the better F1 tracks currently, and certainly the best one in the Herman Tilke era of track design. Now, there was some question of track limits this weekend, and that was something that seems to always come up in Austin, in COTA, and I don't really know why, and I don't really know why it's such an issue. It was weird. There were some corners where they were allowed to cut, and there were some corners where they were not allowed to cut. And so the corners that they were not allowed to cut, they added Verstappers, aka sausage curbs, or as we call them in America, and I wish I was joking when I say this, turtles. Now, those curbs actually ended up causing a few issues that we'll talk about later, but ultimately, I think the track limits debate is a very weird one, because the whole idea of paving those extra areas where otherwise in classic circuit design you would have grass or gravel or a wall, God forbid, like at Monaco, that would be a safety reason. There's a certain amount of runoff area there for a reason. So the idea that the race control, Charlie Whiting and co, were allowing cars to go way off the circuit in some particular areas was a real head scratcher to me. Again, if all this runoff is necessary for safety reasons, why not just, or if it isn't necessary, why not just move the curbs back and move the track limits out if you're willing to let them use that road as liberally as you were? But one great thing about Circuit of the Americas, particularly for these F1 cars, is that since the first Grand Prix held there in 2012, the surface has aged, and through its age, it's actually gotten quite abrasive and bumpy. It's not billiard table smooth, and that actually kind of worked into this weekend's favor, and it actually produced a really interesting Grand Prix where all three tire strategies, meaning the ultra soft, super soft, and soft tires, could all be utilized to run at the front. There wasn't really a set strategy, or the strategy that we usually see in F1 races for the front runners where the two softest tire compounds were used, and that was all we really saw. This was a race that created a lot of variety, and in fact Pirelli was, I won't say struggling with the surface, but the idea was from Pirelli, or at least Pirelli, to try to help with the tire wear, or for whatever reason, maybe not have some of the spectacular failures that we used to see from the Pirellis. They actually had the teams raise the minimum tire pressures on the rear tires, but many teams said that was only going to increase some of the tire wear. It's always weird. You hear one thing from one side of the argument, and you hear one thing from the other side. So qualifying was an interesting thing, and it wasn't necessarily interesting from who won the pole. It was Lewis Hamilton, another fantastic perfection lap that got him up there. but it was really a story of grid penalties, particularly for Sebastian Vettel. Again, he was the guy, or he is the guy, fighting to get into the championship hunt somehow, some way, to prevent Lewis from getting it. So, what does he do? In one of the practice sessions, he gets a 3-place grid penalty for not adhering to the red flags to the letter of the rule. Apparently, he was driving too fast under the red flag conditions and was handed a 3-place grid penalty. So the best he could do on the grid was third if he started from the pole position, or no, fourth, sorry, if he started from the pole position. He didn't get the pole. So Vettel would start fifth. That promoted Kimi Raikkonen to second place on the grid. Now, what was interesting about this was Hamilton's fastest lap was set on the super soft tire, the red sidewalled compound. Kimi's was set on the purple ultra soft, hypersoft, ultra soft. Those get confusing. On the purple sidewall ultra soft. So the conventional wisdom was that Kimi was going to get a better launch off of the starting grid and be able to beat Hamilton to turn one. We'd see how that would turn out later. Now, another interesting bit of qualifying was the first driver to really suffer from the Verstappers. And guess who it was? It was Max Verstappen, who ran wide out of one of the corners, got over the curbs, and it folded in the rear of his Red Bull, and he was not able to participate in Q2 or Q1 if he would have qualified for that, which I think he would have. There's really only 6 cars that are truly capable of running up front in F1. We know this. And it was interesting, or at least it presented an interesting strategy option for Red Bull, because they had fresh sets of not only ultra soft tires, but also the super softs to use in the race. They also took a grid penalty for replacing some part. I think it was like a driveline or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that meant that Verstappen would start in 18th starting position. And a lot of people were thinking, well, there's the crash on lap 1, but it didn't quite turn out that way. So we get to the start of the race, and Raikkonen gets the jump as predicted on Lewis Hamilton. He battled him down into turn 1, made the pass. But it was first lap incidents that were really the tale of this one. First, in the S's, Fernando Alonso got punted out of the way by Lance Stroll. It looked like Alonso was actually backing out of a dangerous situation between quite a few cars, ended up getting hit by Stroll, and his last F1 start in the United States, though I suspect it won't be his last racing start in the United States, ends about 600 meters, I think he said on Twitter, from where it began, and that was unfortunate. Then we get a little further in the S's, and then we get some banging wheels between Charles Leclerc and also Esteban Ocon. That sprayed carbon fiber all over the track, and at this point we'd had 2 incidents on the track, and I was actually surprised that there wasn't a virtual safety car or a safety car. We've seen the FIA be fairly quick on the trigger when it comes to safety cars and virtual safety cars with debris. Didn't happen here. And then we get down to the end of the back straightaway, and yet another contact, a major contact, this time involving Romain Grosjean and again Esteban Ocon, where Grosjean locked up, knocked into Ocon, and eliminated himself from the race, which is unfortunate because it was the first time Haas had gotten into Q3 in their home Grand Prix. But the major story, the major incident of this was Sebastian Vettel looking to get past the Red Bull of Daniel Ricciardo, sends it down the inside, gets into him, spins out, and it was almost a repeat of what we saw in Japan when he tried a low percentage move on Max Verstappen. This time another probably higher percentage move than the one he tried in Japan on Daniel Ricciardo, but again it didn't work out. The Ferrari ends up spinning. Vettel loses a ton of places. So Raikkonen and Hamilton were for sure the class of the field. They began to check out, but then the moment of the race, in my opinion, happens. Daniel Ricciardo has an engine failure. The Renault power unit again failing in his car. His reliability issues have been so terrible all year long, though I have to say I do like the fashion choice with the cowboy suit. Who wore it better? I would ask between Ricciardo and Marco Andretti at the 2008 Indy 500, where he wore that Indiana Jones suit. I don't know, let me know down in the comments. But this brought out the virtual safety car, which really created the key moment in this race. Because the virtual safety car lasted, I think, for 2 laps, it gave the opportunity for the leaders to come into the pits under the virtual safety car. So the question was, with the advanced tire wear on the Dakota surface, who was going to pit? Who was going to make the strategy call to go to a harder compound of tire to try to make it to the end of the race? Kimi Raikkonen threw a dummy. Looked like he was coming into the pits, did not. It got Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton to bite. Hamilton came into the pits, put on the yellow wall soft tire, and looked like, at least, that he was going to try to make it to the end of the race. So at the restart for after the virtual safety car, it was Kimi leading, Hamilton coming up through the field. He got a free pass from Valtteri Bottas to get back up into third, and then it was going to be a battle between Hamilton and the Ferraris. So within 10 laps, Hamilton had caught Kimi on the new soft tires, and certainly Kimi's Ultra Softs were very out to lunch at this point. They had no grip left, and yet there was a fantastic duel between Raikkonen and Hamilton. I think this lasted for about 2 laps. Kimi was able to hold off Hamilton despite Hamilton having DRS and that potent Mercedes power unit in the back of his car. He just couldn't get around him. It was fantastic defense from Kimi, and it was interesting because it was clean. There were no crazy blocks. There wasn't any contact. I think Kimi even said over the radio to the Ferrari team, "I'm not going to do anything stupid," which is the code name for I'm not going to crash Hamilton out so that Vettel has a chance at the championship. And it ended up working out for him. Kimi came into the pits. He got his own set of soft tires, but significantly newer set of soft tires, and set off in pursuit of Hamilton. Now I guess we should talk about the two Vs, Vettel and Verstappen, the two drivers that were, for various reasons, at the back of the grid after the end of lap 1. They were slicing their way through the field very well, particularly Max Verstappen, who had gone from 18th to 9th on the first lap, and by this point in the race was challenging for a podium. He came into the pits to undercut Valtteri Bottas, and he took on super soft tires. Remember, the red sidewall tire, softer compound, and it was interesting because they had this new tire, or a brand new tire to be able to do this with. He was good to go to the end of the race on this tire, and not only did the undercut work, he got around Bottas, but he set off in hot pursuit of Kimi Raikkonen. And it was actually a bit disappointing from the Sky F1 coverage that they didn't really pick up on Verstappen coming up behind Kimi. They were more focused on Hamilton and his difficulties with tire management. They weren't really paying attention to the fact that Verstappen was really closing down the gap to Kimi, because ultimately that was going to be the race if Hamilton had to make a second pit stop. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel gets an interesting taste of schadenfreude when he had team orders put against him to put Kimi up in front because, well, it was ultimately for Vettel's benefit, because Kimi was the driver who was really going to be able to challenge for the victory and thus keep Hamilton at bay and possibly allow the championship to go on to Mexico City. Verstappen and Vettel then would duel for the third place. Verstappen would get the better of Vettel in a pretty good battle, though it would be Vettel coming into the pits also for soft tires. Then we've got the moment of the race, or the other super important moment of the race, which was that Hamilton's tires were absolutely graining. They were absolutely blistering. There was no way they could get to the end of the race. In fact, even Pirelli was interviewed by Ted Kravitz in the pits, and they said there ain't no way he's not going to be able to make it to the end of the race on those tires at his current pace. He was not conserving. He was trying to build a gap. I definitely think that, again, we've heard so much about Ferrari strategy throughout the year and how poor it's been. This was a bad strategy from Mercedes. They should have identified that they were going to need to pit for a second time much earlier in the race when Hamilton had, I think it was almost a 20-second gap. By the time he came into the pits, it was something like 11 seconds. And that was just, it was a botch, no doubt about it, from Mercedes, a rare botch. But it set up a fantastic finish to the Grand Prix. So, lap 38, Hamilton comes into the pits for new softs, falls to 4th place, and there's no way this was over at this point because, as we know, Hamilton is absolutely magic when it's a qualifying lap situation. When when he's allowed off the leash and he's allowed to go full bore, there's pretty much no stopping him. Team orders once again came into effect. Hamilton got around Bottas. Not really much of a surprise there. But then we get kind of the thing that I think F1 fans have been dreaming about seeing for a very long time, and we actually got it. We got Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes. 3 in a row, all together within 3 seconds of each other. This looked like it was going to be an absolutely barn burner of a finish because you had Kimi Raikkonen in what is probably the best car this season with the oldest tires, the soft tires, the yellow compound. Then you have Max Verstappen on the softest tire, and certainly a driver who's incredibly aggressive. Remember, the super soft tire. Then we go to third place, Lewis Hamilton on the newest tires, and probably the best driver of the 3. Well, not just probably. I think most of us would say that Hamilton's better than both Raikkonen and at least Verstappen at this point in his career. So this was very interesting because it almost felt to me from an observation standpoint that these cars were all good because of Verstappen having softer tires. He was going to be able to close up to Kimi, and then Hamilton was going to be able to close up to Verstappen, and there was a potential that we're going to have 3 cars very, very close, if not 3 wide for the lead at some point. In fact, Ferrari predicted that it was going to be 3 laps to go when Hamilton was going to catch the back of Raikkonen. It was actually 2 laps to go when Hamilton would catch Verstappen. And again, fantastic wheel-to-wheel racing. And it was actually interesting because Verstappen and Hamilton went side by side at the same place where Verstappen lost his third place last year to Kimi Raikkonen by cutting the course. He didn't cut it this year. It was actually Hamilton who got caught out. He went out on the marbles and went wide, though obviously he didn't hit anything. There was more than enough runoff there for Hamilton to continue into the fight. But that was the advantage that Kimi needed to pull away. Now, things got worse for Hamilton, unfortunately, here in this scenario, because not only did he not get second place and wouldn't be able to challenge Kimi in the final lap of the race for the overall victory, back in the back of the pack, Sebastian Vettel was turning some absolutely fantastic laps, caught Valtteri Bottas and passed him coming off of the back straightaway. So now only, well, it wasn't even one place. It was Vettel was right behind Hamilton in 4th as Hamilton was in 3rd. So the championship was absolutely not going to be decided in Austin, Texas. And even more kind of spectacular, not only did Kimi break that, I think it was like 38 race streak of not making up a place on the first lap of a Grand Prix, he took the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, the first win for Ferrari at the Circuit of the Americas in Formula One. The first time Mercedes has been beaten in the turbo hybrid era in the United States Grand Prix, and the first race in 113 races. You have to go all the way back to Australia, Melbourne, in 2013, when Kimi Raikkonen was driving and won for Lotus. It's been that long. V8 era, remember. Think about where you were the last time Kimi Raikkonen won a Grand Prix. I think back and my God, how many things have changed in that time. I don't think Max Verstappen was still racing karts at this particular moment in history. So, yeah, the longest Grand Prix, or the longest streak between Grand Prix victories ever for Kimi Raikkonen. It's fantastic. I know there are some detractors out there of Kimi Raikkonen. I'm not one of them. I'm definitely a fan. I understand that he rubs people the wrong way sometimes. People don't like because that meme does get annoying. But when you look at it, Kimi is a no BS driver. He's there to do the job, do it well, get it done, and again, there wasn't a whole lot of emotion from Kimi. I don't think anybody really expected a whole lot of emotion from Kimi. But you have to know that deep inside, that was really feeling good for Raikkonen. And it was a feel-good story. I think a lot of people want to see, some of the classic drivers. I mean, he's a classic driver now. It's amazing. But he's the kind of driver that we're not going to have around for very much longer, I don't think. I think, he's going to go to Sauber. Not a Sauber Mercedes, though. He's going to go to Sauber next year. We'll see how long that lasts. It'll be interesting to see how Sauber's performance increases if they get a little more help from Ferrari, which is rumored. I know Martin Brundle said it was going to look like a B Ferrari. That would be a bit interesting, but we'll just have to see. This may be Kimi's last win in F1, so I think we should appreciate it while it's here. Another notable thing about the end of this Grand Prix was the fact that two drivers finished in the points who really didn't. Esteban Ocon and Kevin Magnussen, driving for Haas, got some points in their home Grand Prix. Oh, no, he didn't. Because there was a fuel, or let me rephrase this. They used more fuel than they were allowed. Formula One has a certain amount of energy you can use throughout the race in the turbo hybrid era. It's something similar to if you watched a World Endurance Championship race. There's a certain allotment of energy you're allowed per lap, per race, and if you go over that, you're out. Well, both of those cars were thrown out, which was interesting because it promoted Brendan Hartley in the Toro Rosso Red Bull and Marcus Ericsson in the Sauber Ferrari to be up into the points, which is interesting as well because these are the two drivers who have been pretty much routinely beaten by their teammates, and yet here in the United States Grand Prix, they both end up not only being their teammates, but ending up scoring points. So, in all, I think it was a really fantastic Grand Prix. I hope you did enjoy my review of this. I definitely would like to keep doing this, so, I mean, if you are enjoying my F1 content, let me know down in the comments. It'll be, I would be very surprised if Hamilton does not clinch in Mexico City. I think that's where it's going to be. It's where it was last year where he got the championship, and that should be one whale of a celebration again. Hamilton, I mean, he's so far and above everybody else at this current moment. It really is something special to see. I know some people will say, well, Hamilton stinks up the show, but ultimately, we got to respect greatness when we see it, and Hamilton's certainly that. So, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe for more motorsport F1 content, and we'll see you in the next video. Meow, meow. That was a funny moment, wasn't it?